Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. There are a few people that I had high on the list that I was really hoping we could interview this offseason, and today is one of those days. So I'm super excited for today's pod. We finally get to complete the trifecta of Andrews here. I'm, of course, joined by Andy Molitor, who's muted for whatever reason. Myself, Drew Dinzik. And, of course, we welcome Andrew at Time and C on Twitter. First ever guest to the Deep Dive pod. Oh, Andy just bailed on us. Well, it is what it is. Andrew, welcome to the Deep Dive.
How's it going?
Oh, so I'm sitting here watching Utah, Boston, seeing Rudy Gobert's Defensive Player of the Year hopes crumble before my eyes. So I couldn't be happier because I'm not a Rudy Gobert guy. And I
think I know a few people who would like to see those hopes crumble.
Yeah, he's just getting absolutely abused right now by Boston's offense, which, Boston's playing well, but clearly they're not an offensive powerhouse, although going up against Utah is making them look good tonight. That said, while we wait for Andy to come back, appreciate you joining us tonight so we can get a little bit into what it is to be kind of an advantage player and an originator in the college basketball space. I first heard of you from the TBWC, This Business We Chose pod with Philip Shepard. You had a great episode, and that whole catalog is great. If you're into this at the highest level, I could not recommend that more to go check those out. They are all great listens. You need to dedicate about 2 weeks of your life to hear them all, but that's beside the point. It was a cool story, and then lo and behold, run up against you in the Bet the Process Calcutta last year for the college hoops. And you smoked me. So it was immediately like, wow, I got to get this guy on eventually and kind of talk a little bit about process. And, particularly at least the stage that I'm in as a player and listening to your breakdown of your process and where, kind of where you play and how you're staking and all of that. Seems like, I could definitely, I'm interested in learning a lot from you in terms of, what you think about the space. And so I guess kind of before getting into some of the details, give people an idea of some of your background. You kind of pivoted into this sort of midstream, leaving a professional, career as a trader and becoming a professional sports bettor. Is that a fair description?
Yeah. I don't think there was as much intent there as it sounds like.
You woke up one day and you're like, I'm not going back. Never again.
I was betting sports kind of small, probably still with some advantage, but not doing it in the most professional way, just kind of the small markets and the little edges that you can find without really modeling anything or kind of stuff like that. And then the fund I was working at kind of wasn't working out and left kind of looking for the next thing, thinking I was going to do this on the side until then. And we're some years later and I still haven't found the next thing. So here we are.
Okay. So the key crossover, as far as I could tell, between what you were doing, which was derivatives or options.
Derivatives
something along those lines.
I can't even hear you. I tried to turn
no.
my phone, Drew, but I can't hear you. I'll see if I can fix that. Yeah, the
All
whole
right.
building, I'm just sitting here in the dark, terrified now.
Oh, Jesus. The
Full
power went
blur
out?
during the opening credits. And again, I can't hear you, but I can
Is this
talk.
are you having the same tornado storms that ripped through the southeast is now in Minnesota, apparently? Well, anyway, we'll get that worked out. In the meantime,
send somebody to check on him.
Yeah, seriously. Whatever's going on in Minnesota is headed your way because you were in Chicago, right? Anyway, it's probably not a weather related thing. It's got to be just a building related thing. But regardless, the key kind of and people know, I think people who listen to this pod know my background. Like, I do earthquake engineering, seismology stuff. A lot of my day job is building distributions for predicting events. And that is, I think, a useful starting point to evaluate a market. And I don't know that a lot of people think of, I need to develop a number. And, what it's almost more important to think of it as, I need to develop a distribution. And then from that distribution, evaluate whatever the median market thinks, to try to find an edge. And I guess, is that, number one, do you think that's a fair way of going about it? And number two, what are some of the key inputs that you think are important when it comes to building out a distribution for projecting a game?
Well, it's a broad question, but yeah, obviously, advanced statistics pretty important in trying to predict anything, and definitely in sports and finance and apparently natural disasters as well. And I mean, as far as what goes into predicting,
well, let me ask you a better question, because Andy was
Okay.
distracting me. Honestly, the now we can't hear him because he's muted.
I had my mic muted. No, that was on me. No, but I mean, that was just a really long question. Sometimes you do that to me too, and I forget. Like at the end of your sentence, I'm like, I forget what you're asking.
I'm obviously trying to stretch here so that we could get your tech worked out.
No, I mean, I'm just the whole town is out, I guess.
Sorry, man. But no, I think what I was trying to get at is, for the most part, if you're using a power ratings, let's use that, and you have a power number for two teams, and you want to know what a spread should be, you take the difference of those. You got a median expectation of what that power number would be, or even maybe just an average. But when it comes to coming up with a distribution, the key part, at least in my mind, is capturing the uncertainty. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no secret that with as advanced as betting markets are, that a straight linear power ratings is probably missing some stuff, in terms of any number of things, but it doesn't provide a lot of context for the two teams playing each other, and the context tends to matter. I don't know if one team's better against something that some other team does, which is why I think getting a little bit beyond that is probably helpful in getting better at predicting games and ultimately betting on them.
Do you feel like the uncertainty part of the process is correlated at all with where you end up, kind of finding the greatest edges and doing most of your damage as a sports bettor?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, with as good as markets are, and they are pretty good, and it is hard to win. It's hard to have big edges without some weird unknowns, right? Like in every sport, the people making the numbers or opening the numbers, if there's nothing weird or nothing super unknown, it's really not that hard to get pretty close to what the number should be. So the angles and the extra information and the weird situations definitely make for all the super large edges. And I mean, those don't come around that often, but it's the weird stuff that's happening when they do.
Okay, so as sort of a specific example, then let's say you do a projection for a game, and you have a pretty big difference between your mean and your median projection, and market is pretty close to median. This is something that comes up a lot with like Super Bowl player props usually, right? Or at least it used to. I think nowadays almost everything's kind of founded by the median, but I think is that something you look at between your projection and and what the market is is hanging or how it's maturing, I mean, am I even in the right ballpark in terms of anything about your process?
No, I mean, for sure. I do think it's difficult in just where the liquidity lies. It's really hard to capitalize on, if you have a wider variance than the market, right? If the mean and, if your distribution's really wide and you see some weird outcomes, there's just not a lot of liquidity in betting for a lot of markets, like alternate spreads or, I mean, golf outrights are clearly somewhere you could capitalize on that. And maybe some futures in major sports, but even those have their own, liquidity issues and time constraint issues. And so I guess as much as it sounds cool, I think it's difficult to capitalize on that edge more than it is just kind of trying to have good predictions.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just more of a war of attrition via volume then, because smaller edges with big volume. And I mean, I think that's where baseball guys are for the most part too. That's why I could never do the grind of baseball. Also, I don't think I'm smart enough to pay attention to all the pitching stats. Like, so many of those baseball guys are doing so much with pitching that I just don't have the time or bandwidth over the summer for. But it's interesting with just how college basketball has been the last couple of years with how some of the markets open. You do see those alt spreads, but you're right. Like, they're few and far between. They're low limits, and what are you going to try to do with those anyway? So you go after that sort of stuff. That's just a book you're not going to have anymore.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you mentioned the war of attrition, which is part of the reason that I'm still betting a lot of college basketball, is because it sucks. It's low limit. It's hard to get down. It carries with it all of the tough things about betting, but there's so many games that you can just keep getting down volume and keep churning. And it's hard to replace that. So if I could bet, a bunch of alt stuff and weird props, I would love to do that, but I don't see that market coming around anytime soon.
Yeah, what did Brinson say when he was we had like a bad day on tennis or something? He's like, I just need the NBA draft and the NFL draft to happen tomorrow, and we'll be fine. Like, it's like every year we just say, like, we wish the NFL draft was once a month or stuff like that, but you're just never gonna have volume on stuff like that.
No, surely. And those are almost entirely different universes from a handicapping standpoint, which is why it's, and there's a whole discussion to be had about, you keep some accounts open, you keep your liquidity available for moments like that. And when you have stuff that is known enormous edges so that you can get something down. Because if you don't, then, you're stuck with, like if you wanted to bet college, NFL draft props today, well, you're not going to be able to get anything down unless you have 500 accounts. And that's, keeping 500 accounts live is a matter of delicate balance as well on top of that. But as going back to kind of process related questions here, I've found, at least personally, that, coming up with a fair price or a number or even a really good distribution is becoming, it has always been a little tough to realize meaningful winnings in liquid markets, just because it's very, very challenging. And it has gotten to the point where at least I feel like I'm not using the actual numbers as much for making plays as I am for just sort of a ground truthing. And I add kind of a qualitative layer on things where I'm like, okay, this is a tangible edge. Like I know where the market is getting its fair, and there's this potential angle that's not being captured that's qualitative or even quantitative. That I can layer on top and use to find some edges or some angles. Are you noticing the same thing as you kind of continued to go through your process as a professional, that the numbers themselves are more of an indicator to start your handicap as opposed to sort of the end all be all, hey, these are my numbers, go bet them, call it a day?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And I think a lot of that is probably also you do as well. The more you model stuff or build stuff, you get to know your own stuff that you've built pretty well. And so where, like, man, I like this team every day. Like, I'm wrong here. I just know I'm wrong. I've seen how the market goes. Like, if I'm 2 points above market there, I'm probably on market. And I think that kind of stuff is where, the qualitative addition, the sort of like trader instinct of like, yeah, I'm just wrong here. It sort of comes in and is helpful.
More helpful to making good bets or avoiding bad ones?
I mean, probably both. Even qualitative stuff that I'm doing, at some point, I'm trying to ascribe a price to it. Now, it might not be the most data-oriented thing in the world, but like the best players out bet the other side is never what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and make a good guess at what everything is worth that I can control, and then, do the best with it.
I think it's better for me as far as fitting bad bets. It's like knowing where your leaks are, or where you're just massively not figuring things out. And sometimes you just stop and say, like, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm going to stop trying to figure this out. There's a weird my stuff couldn't quite fathom how bad Mississippi Valley State was at a bunch of different facets of the game. And it just kept saying, like, oh, this is a good under spot. And it's a team that can just, on any given night, give up 100 points if they decide to play poorly. Or I didn't even look into some of these box scores. Just, I'd avoid it, and then I'd go back and look, and they'd lost, 110 to 60 or something in a total in the 140s. So I think a lot of times I just run lots for something's not quite jiving. I don't have time to figure out Mississippi Valley State for this year, and we're just gonna start avoiding this altogether and kind of track what happens. It's interesting though, because usually when I identify that spot later on, I'm like, I should have almost been betting the other side of this. It's just if I would have followed, where my numbers were on this, I would have gone like 2-15 or something ridiculous. That's hyperbole, but I've had some weird ones like that where I know right away, like, this number is just fucked every single game.
Yeah, plugging leaks that's a good way to put it. So if you're caught by surprise by your baseline number, make fair, look at the market, and it's meaningfully off, and it is a teams that you thought everybody kind of knows, like you mentioned, no information. There's really no reason that there should be a huge misprice here. What are some of, what's your first instinct? Like, did somebody beat this number in a certain direction because they have information that's not known? Is there something fundamentally that I'm missing, or are those the spots where you're like, oh, well, I get to catch the poor number here? That's fine by me. Like, what is sort of your gut from I have an edge to I'm making the bet?
I mean, the situations are different. Timing is clearly important because there's some players if we're talking about basketball and college football, which is a lot of what I bet specifically, there's just some people who are moving early markets with a ton of volume and who are very informed. I'm sure everyone listening knows who these people are. It's like the Right Angle Sports and other people's like that in the world.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think like a lot of times numbers are off because they're moving markets really heavily. And then it's again, like, you kind of have to handicap a little bit, like what their edge is, how much are they winning, and like how much is the line moving enough where you can be like, okay, I know he's good, but he's not, 65% good kind of stuff.
Okay.
I mean, most of the time I'm betting this, like I'm gonna bet stuff that's off market and learn by doing a lot, especially when you're playing a volume game. If it's the third time in a row and the same team's lost by 40 both times, I'll probably try and bet a little less. Not, full Kelly right into it, but yeah, I mean, I think like anyone will say, the context around when the number gets bet, when you're betting, what you're looking at, all that stuff matters.
Do you do much forensics in terms of who you're up against in situations like that? Like, do you want to know who's on the other side? Do you have sort of at least a mental model profile of the other players in the major markets you're trying to clean up on?
I mean, forensics sounds way more.
Yeah, you made that sound really fancy.
No, you know what I mean. Though. Like,
yeah, I think it's pretty easy to tell sometimes. Like, there's certain players who are, if things will just move a little extra than normal, or like it will just cascade all at once, and you kind of know maybe not who it is, but you kind of know, like, in order to make certain markets light up like that, like they have to be betting a really significant amount of money. So I don't know, I mean, that goes into it. If I told you I had an exact science for exactly how to react to that situation, I don't. I'm just best guess and make a bet and hope it wins and move on to the next thing.
I mean, do you ever adjust or even think about double checking or doing some sanity checks on a number if, let's say there's a group like that. Can we let's just say RAS on a total. They come in and blow up a total, not only because of what they're betting, but who they're releasing it to.
Sure,
and
yeah.
A lot of other people. And Dan's reminding me I got to switch back to my good mic again here. But let's say you disagree with their move, and the market moves with them. It might be synthetic CLV because of, again, the money and all the other accounts.
I don't think you can even argue that. Definitely.
But to be fair, some of it is good closing line value. A portion of it.
Sure.
A decent chunk is synthetic. But if a market keeps moving that way and you disagree, I mean, do you take a step back and start looking at that, or you just bang your head against it and think eventually, again, treating it like attrition, be like, eventually I can't sit here and look at everybody else's numbers and try to agree with everybody. I got to trust my stuff over a big sample.
I have supreme confidence, and I am just the biggest bettor in the world. So I just bet against every move that goes against me until I'm out of money.
I this.
I think you doubt a little bit, and you investigate further. Like, am I missing some giant piece of information? I will probably send some bets against market moves like that, and then maybe a little more, and then at some point I'm done. I don't know.
Have you heard?
I wish I had a more interesting answer.
Have you heard some of the interviews from the RAS guys where they talk about being generally info bettors?
Yeah,
it sounds a little BSy to me. I haven't talked to them personally, and I don't know what their process is at all, but surely back in the day they were grinding an edge based on information, but I don't know. I have a tough time buying that it's not mostly quantitative with a little info sprinkle.
I honestly could see a bunch of scenarios where a bunch of things are true. They probably do a bunch of everything, which is something you can do when you have a staff or a bunch, or a few people. And I mean, contextualizing information is really hard, and I'm guessing they do that part well. Like, they have the info, but they also know, what so-and-so is worth, or they have a good idea of how much worse the offense is going to be without him, kind of thing. And that's what makes them good.
Yeah. Well, and, I was being facetious when I said, do you just bang your head against these other groups constantly? But I mean, it's not ridiculous to say that sometimes you're going to. And again,
sure.
And again, having the information, knowing, again, it's not just them. There's other big groups or there are other big players, but knowing that there's a big group or a big player that's going to come against something that you're probably on the other side of, again, you talk about timing, it's fine to know, if I think someone's going to move against me here, I could probably wait. I might get a better number if I think this is going to move against me constantly, because, and, not in every case, but in some cases where you're still, like you joked, supremely confident still, or you still think you're right, the timing is really going to play a big part there.
For sure. But I mean, you have to just be wrong enough times to learn that. I don't know. I hit some trick, a number's moved 3 points my way, gotta bet this, and then it's available 2.5 points later when I don't want to bet anymore on it. And you do that enough and you kind of get familiar. I mean, I don't know.
But I guess college basketball is not small enough limits that you run into the situation where you have a subset of your plays where you are up against other professionals, where you're getting a bet size that is 10x your average bet otherwise, right? Because I've heard other people who are professionals complain about this. I've never run into it because I'm betting NBA, NFL, and I'm getting what I want when I want it, and it's not really. There's not usually a lot of back and forth, but if you have 10 plays and 9 of them the side moves after one click and you're 2-3 points and now the edge is gone, but the 10th one someone's on the other side fighting back and you end up with 10x on that side. I think at that point you're probably realizing this is my weakest edge and I need to run good on those subset of big staked plays. Am I even on the right track with that?
Yeah, I mean, some of that's true. Some of it is trying to be able to get enough down so that it's not 10x. It's the one that someone plays back at you. It's like 2 or 3.
Oh, okay.
I mean, betting in small markets, you just kind of got to figure out how to get down. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. Yeah, I mean, definitely the plays where there's more available, you got to run good on. I just don't think not a lot there to say about it other than, yeah, hope to get lucky on those and try to not bet so much that they like own your whole season. But
yeah, okay, that makes total sense. Is it hard to, or is it? I guess I would describe you as an originator in general. Do you find it relatively straightforward to get down what you are trying to get down at this stage as a professional without having betting partners, or is that just sort of part of the equation when it becomes a job?
I think it's all sport specific. I mean, you talked about it. You can, NBA, but even that is like, if you want to bet early numbers, you probably still need some help at some amount.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think there's this constant battle of, I would love to move later in the betting cycle and have bigger limits, but then, as a person trying to find edge, you see edges just disappear while you're waiting, and it's kind of hard. So there's this back and forth of trying to bet early, but also, trying to move back in the betting cycle so you can kind of get more and not have to worry about, racing to the plays every time, which is frustrating and, isn't helpful for kind of anyone trying to get down.
Yeah. Is there any correlation between the ones that disappear while you're waiting for the limits to go up and those being the easiest and truest edges?
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
It's the low hanging fruit, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think in certain markets, like especially because with, I think there's probably 10 sites now who will make you a price with some signal on every college basketball game. There's not just KenPom anymore. Like,
yeah,
there are edges that come from categorizing those numbers that disappeared before you can really bet if you're trying to bet, more than a few $100, just because it takes not very hard modeling to find those.
Yeah, that's I mean, we talk about this over the years. God, Drew, remember back in the day, like 5 years ago, and one summer you sat down and you're like, I think we should track CLV this summer. And then we spent like a month trying to figure out the best way to actually calculate it because 10 people gave us 10 different answers. And then, over the years, we've kind of determined our CLV is a spectrum, whatever theory, if you want to call it that, where it's like, hey, guess what? If it moves in the NFL and, mid to late week, like that matters. And then trying to explain to people like, hey, guess what? You bet a shitty awards market and it moved like $1. That doesn't matter. You might have done that yourself with like a $250 bet. And I think like he's saying, college basketball, those moves in the morning, like after it's the day of the game, it's mid-morning Eastern time, and there start to be some decent moves. Like as you get towards the afternoon, like that stuff wins. Like you see that stuff just wins. And that is annoying, is like, it's not even me just like waiting and being some savvy trader. Sometimes I just get busy and I have my numbers and I don't bet something. And then I go look, I'm like, shit, that was the right side, huh? Like this one's just not getting bet today, I guess, because somebody else came in. And I mean, you can just blow up those markets. I mean, some people, especially totals in college, it's a whole different world compared to like what we do in the fall with NFL, waiting for a 0.5 point move here and there.
Yeah, there's always a quote in the back of my mind that the at Brett Favre 444, who's he has a tweet from a few years back that was like, if I'm still betting college basketball after I turn 30, somebody kill me. And sometimes there are days that I'm like, I feel like such an amateur trying to like just get down on these tiny markets that are flipping everywhere. And, there's a million other people trying to model the same thing, but
yeah. So from a synthesizing information standpoint with college basketball specifically, I have kind of come to the opinion, at least in the NBA and the NFL, that player absences are way overstated in the market, just as a general rule of thumb. Unless it's a quarterback in the NFL, unless it's like a 40% usage guy on a team that has no one else with depth. Like some of these moves, particularly on sides, are overblown. Is that true in college, or are the moves that you see because of information in college maybe exactly correct because of depth issues and kind of the disparity of talent as you go down a depth chart?
I mean, the boring answer is that on the whole, it's probably pretty fair with a slight lean toward too much priced in. I mean, certain ones are weird. Certain ones are probably very underpriced. Certain ones get way overpriced. And it's also, I think, especially in like NFL or NBA markets, the sources of information are really public, and the information finds its way through the market pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas here you can kind of like, there are some schools that nobody's reporting on, but you can be pretty sure someone's out if you do a little bit of research. But then that news will hit the market like an hour before tip, and it'll move like the market had no idea that player was out, when sometimes it was priced in a little bit. I don't know if that was the clearest way to say that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
And at the lowest low levels, like basically I finally came to like I don't know if it wasn't a realization, and this might not even be true. This might just be me saying something that I believe that probably isn't even true. But if it has a 6-digit rotation number, there's not a player on the roster that matters. Like to the number, to the price. Like if it's an extra game, like one player missing is not enough to move the number. We need 3 or 4 kids out with the flu. Like basically informational stuff on that.
I would invite you to take a bunch of money and please express that opinion in markets.
I've just struggled with. I think a lot of it has come from people saying like, "Oh man, this guy's out for this side, and we're gonna bet this." And then I've seen time and time again, just like maybe that matters over a big sample, but man, just I haven't seen empirical evidence that like one player matters on a lot of these teams when it's just at the smallest level. Once you get up to I don't know, there's like different levels of the mid majors. I've started to like stratify it now completely. Like if you get up to the MAC and stuff like that, there's a lot of players that matter, but man, it seems like some of this stuff, when you get informational things and like the SWAC and the MEAC, it just never goes right. And I've started to just look at that and be like, how many players are out? How many minutes does this guy play? And it has to be. It has to be.
Well, maybe the answer is it was built in.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, like that's what I'm saying. I think there are moves on that stuff, and if you get to that final number, that closing number, it's overblown.
Yeah.
Like to the point, maybe I'm saying it wrong. Not that they don't matter, but they don't matter to the point of what's happening to that market when it closes, if that information gets out and gets bet.
I mean, certainly by necessity, some of the teams all the way down the spectrum just have a flatter line of talent. Like,
that's a good way to say it.
It just at some point, if you're good, if you're really good, you wouldn't be playing for some of these places. Now, it's not always true, but I mean, I think on the whole, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So NBA, if you're going to start handicapping NBA sides and you're not using a player level model, best of luck to you. If you're going to start handicapping NBA totals and you're not using like a possession level model, best of luck to you. Either of those things matter at all in the college game, or can you basically still get it done with the team level projection at this point?
I I honestly don't. I mean, I don't think you can do completely team level. I mean, I'm sure some people are in winning, so I don't want to like. I'm not an unbelievable modeler of data, and so I'm sure someone who is could probably find a way to take less data and do better. For me, I can't. Um, I just need to have some player level context around it, or else I think you'll just bet
Wow.
into the wrong edges.
Oh, that was, I
Interesting.
like how you said because that's exactly what I was going to say. Is it team level plus context? Like it's doing it at the team level and then adding in context secondarily, because doing like 100% player level model like people can do with the NBA, I don't know. That just seems like that seems Looney Tunes for the amount of teams that play every night in college basketball. Unless you had a staff, I guess that would be an undertaking.
Are there any public models out there that are doing player level projections? I don't think
I
I
think
don't know.
some of these sites try. I think there's a few sites that try to.
But the team level projection they're giving you is a composite, or it's a.
I think they have player level data in there. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
So I don't think player level data is as difficult to work with just because, I mean, there's a findable box score every night. There's a team roster, and at that point, that's the data you need. And you're definitely working with smaller samples, and you may not get as many there's a lot of advanced statistics in the NBA that are calculated for you and given to you in cleaner data sets.
Sure.
But the tools are out there to build good player level models, and even to, as I kind of do, build bad ones. So I mean, without saying here's what I do and this is how to do it.
Yeah, no doubt. No worries.
The fact that the props exist, and the fact that there are markets, whether it's at sports books or some of the DFS sites that have player level props for college basketball players now, like all that stuff does exist out there. Again, just they're not going all the way to the bottom. You're not going to get player level or player props on like MEAC games. Again, I keep shitting on the MEAC, even though I love them. But at the same time, like you said, those box scores exist just the same. Like you go to any of the sites, like the box scores for the MEAC aren't any different than the box scores for the SEC. It's going to tell you the same core stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's accurate.
Do they have like play-by-play data readily available?
It's out there. I think you might have
for the most part
wrangle it for yourself. But there's play-by-play data on pretty much every game.
Yeah, it's not like the NFL where they have a nice depository of that. It exists, but yeah, you'd have to pull it all and clean it up.
So you could conceivably do possession level stuff if you wanted to have decent numbers for college totals then. That's interesting.
I kind of have found the more sorry to interrupt you, but the deeper you get into betting stuff, somebody out there is probably already doing the thing that you're surprised can be done. At least that's what I've found. It's like when I started betting, I was like, oh, this is not that hard. I'm probably doing I'm winning and I'm doing all this stuff. And then it's like, yeah, somebody else has been doing that. And the more advanced you get, it turns out somebody else could also do the more advanced thing. So maybe not true in this case, but it sounds true.
There's always someone doing it better than you. Like that's the case in every industry in the world. I think somebody's else. I mean, just look at God. This is weird. This popped in my head, but cyclists, like they're always 2 steps ahead of the people who are putting together testing, like the blood doping. Like the people that come up with that are 2 steps ahead of everyone else. There's always someone doing it better. It'd be interesting. Yeah. God, now my brain's gonna be stuck in this player level thing now for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think even if you are doing it the best of anyone in the industry, someone's trying to replicate what you're doing, and in that process is going to find something potentially valuable. My favorite example, at least, and I'm sure there's a million people who've heard this story before, so it's not even really that useful telling it, but somebody figured out at one point, long after like they came up with player level models for baseball totals, that like, hey, we need to incorporate the humidity. Right. And like, if you're the first person that figures that out because you're trying to grind like a player level total, and you're like, I don't understand why this isn't working in these games in these time of year in these cities, like what is happening? And then you're like, oh my God, it's because of the weather. And you're the first person that figures that out, then you leapfrog the next, the guy who was the end boss originator of totals, right? So yeah, that the process of all of this is fascinating to me, and continuing to upgrade your own way of doing things makes total sense. Do you feel like you have an iterative growth to the way you come up with fairs in college basketball?
I'll say yes with a caveat in that I think for me the toughest thing is always like grinding versus improving, and that they're kind of at odds with each other all the time. Like daily betting edges and watching markets and getting feedback on your bets and all this stuff is like a day-to-day process. And sometimes while you're doing that, it's difficult to just put it all down and be like, okay, I need to sit there and work with, whatever, some scripts today and just make some stuff better and do a little investigation into some scenario that's, why when I bet this team, I never get CLV, or why this team always closes a certain way, or stuff like that. And I think it's tough to balance that. So I try, but I probably lean toward a little too much toward betting and grinding out edge and, trying to revenue positive.
Yeah, there's always question, like everything you do, like you talk about, why am I not getting CLV on this side or this team, or, a team that I'm constantly taking overs with, and then you develop questions, and then that question takes a bunch of time to answer, and you have to balance especially, you doing this professionally, you have to balance not only the time spent grinding, getting down, betting, taking care of everything day to day, but also a life outside of that. How much time do you want to take out of, your personal life to try to solve this extra problem? Because you have no idea what the end, the return on the investment will be. You could spend 40 hours on a problem and find out like you didn't learn anything, you haven't improved anything. Like it's got to be the annoying part about trying to solve some of those problems. And at two, you talk about, Drew, like again, back to somebody else doing it better. That's like the whole, you don't know what you don't know. Like there's probably people who have a pretty good idea based on what kind of influence they can have, especially once you get towards the top. But there's a lot of people that you don't know where you're at on that ladder. Like you have no idea. It's like whatever 5 years ago when I started tinkering with this, and I'm like, holy shit, I was beating, like I was waiting for Bet Online to open at like 3 p.m. the day before and betting those numbers, like the absolute stone cold nuts, softest online numbers. And I was winning against that. And I'm like, I thought Billy Walters and Jesus Christ just had a baby and it was me. I'm like, look at this. I was like tracking my CLV on that stuff. And I'm like, I'm averaging like 10% across the board or something stupid. And then you find out like, oh, like people hate people like me because I'm just fucking up early numbers and messing with stuff and at low limits. And there's a word for that too that we won't even put in the air, but it's the whole you don't know thing. I think that continues, but it got to be certain point. At a certain point, you do know because you are having an influence on a major market at a high enough level. You have to realize like I'm in a certain percentile here. And
it's this very, very, very small number of people that get to that ever, and as far as I can tell you, do you think that the general kind of explosion of public models that are out there for college basketball has influenced the way the market matures? And has that kind of unlocked any kind of cool new edges? Like, holy crap, when these guys post their numbers, or when somebody's betting, multi-clicking this public model's numbers, and I know they're wrong on this conference or something like that. Like, has that been a positive or a net negative that there's more public people that are putting out numbers?
It's a good question. I don't honestly know. My instinct is to say it's not good when someone else does public analytical work that is for free to everyone. And especially like, I think in this space, particularly, like the people doing this stuff are really good. Like we spend a lot of time in betting markets talking about like, oh, like this is where Ken Palm is wrong versus the market, but he is really, really good. So to be honest, I don't know whether it's good or bad. I know that there's definitely certain sites that have like strong leans that probably shape the market a little. And it's one of those things we talked about where like if your internal numbers are different, like you just know that you're going to show edges there. But yeah, I don't have a super informed answer on whether it's good or bad. I know it's something you have to deal with, and you kind of have to shoot for, things they're maybe not picking up, or, looking at kind of like micro subsets of the data instead of kind of doing it at a macro scale.
Yeah, like I'm imagining like being a golf originator, and you're always kind of wondering why the market's moving the way it's moving, and there's a lot of players, you're not sure who's behind it, blah blah blah. And then data golf comes around, and like, okay, now you have sort of an answer key as to why a lot of the market is shaping the way it is. And you have an answer key as far as like, oh, I know where I'm different than them, and so I know once I'll have opportunities to do this, this, and this, because this is going to move too much and this is going to move too much. So I imagine that was in like a net positive, even though, ultimately it may seem like, oh, my secret of I was using strokes gained and no one else was is now no longer a secret.
Well, and that's where I was almost thinking you might say it's a net positive. I wasn't surprised at your answer. I was thinking about a reason why you would say it'd be a positive. And it went to the golf thing too, because I know there's golf originators who have better numbers than data golf, and they know that like the influence or a public facing model can have on a market like golf. And they know that, if they're better over a long term than the data golf numbers, it's not like Drew says the answer key, but you can really tell which way the market's going to be shaped based on their stuff, and it's just another tool, I suppose, to use.
Helps you with your timing and market entry. It gives you better opportunity. Yeah.
I will say what it probably does is it probably raises the bar for what it takes to be, if you're just starting out and saying, I want to bet on this thing and I'm going to use some data and model it, where you have to get to then be profitable and churn money is probably higher. Okay. Especially because I think, and I mean, I will ask you guys after if you agree, but when you start doing this, if you are winning small, it kind of builds on itself. You allow yourself to learn while not losing too much money. And with data golf out there now, I think a lot of those edges where you can win a little while learning how to win a lot are probably gone. So, I mean, I don't know. It seems like it's probably easier if you're already established to kind of hone up some edges. But if you're just starting, it seems really difficult to climb the mountain.
That meshes perfectly, I think, with like the example I just gave, like the guys who are actual professional golf originators, they're okay with it because they can use it as a tool. Whereas somebody who is really low on the rung doesn't really have their own pricing, their own projections, not scraping their own data. They're just, if they're using anything public facing from a few of the places that put out golf data, or even just grabbing it from like the PGA site, that was already going to be an uphill battle to beat a market. And now it's just increased tenfold for the people at the very beginning of the race. Yeah. So like, it just raises the barrier to entry, I think, for anyone. And it just creates, like you say, if you can slowly build upon that first stuff and not lose much or make a little, you learn so much. And then at the point where you've learned a bunch, you haven't quit yet. Whereas a lot of those people, they're going to quit. Like that, I'm just getting the shit kicked out of me. This is no fun. Why would I model golf?
There's a hidden negative liquidity churn where there's fewer people putting money in the pool.
Well, I kind of quit trying to bet. I tried to bet golf a little and kind of quit, so I know the struggle well.
Yeah, I don't pretend.
We're on to Punta Cana. We're dead. Match play is just dead to me. God, like it's true. Can you imagine, like, if they just 1 week in the NFL season a year, they just switched to the Canadian rules, and
It's
then we just said,
Yeah.
hey, let's bet this anyway. Let's let's throw money at this like it's normal golf or normal football. Like throwing match play in here is annoying to me.
Yeah,
I still watch the shit out of it.
I won't stand for match play, so
I will not.
You're
We're putting our foot
preaching to the
down.
converted. Okay. The generally kind of curious if you think that as you kind of put, as you're, as you consume college basketball, watching it and betting it, it may be tough to divorce like, oh, like I'm getting better at this overall versus like you're seeing trends change, the game itself change as the macro trends in basketball change. I mean, NBA is might as well be a different sport than the one I grew up watching. Like there's 0% chance that if you had put me in that put anyone who was a originator and world beater in the NBA markets in the early 2000s, drop them out of a coma and put them in today's market, that they're going to understand what's going on and be able to win. Have you noticed that there are sort of large scale changes in college basketball that, just in general, the game has evolved or is evolving as, kind of the way that basketball is played, even down to the youth level, continues to change?
There's definitely changes. They're slower. And I do think a lot of the better teams are the good teams who have the talent to do it are gravitating toward what we'd call modern basketball. Whereas to me, it seems there's sort of like this stylistic split where the teams that are less endowed with talent kind of almost go the other way, as it's like, well, we are going to slow it down and limit possessions because there's no chance we win if we play fast. Or they are, some teams are kind of embracing getting mid-range shots because those shots are being given a little more freely. But I think on the whole, I mean, the same trends are present in the sport everywhere. Like a lot more teams are shooting more threes and playing with a little more tempo and doing more modern basketball type things.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been a seismic shift. I'm trying to think if I'm just missing something massive, but like the shift in the NBA, the whatever you want to call it, where mid-range jumpers just disappeared. Everything's in the paint or behind the arc. Like you say, it's starting, but that's a good way to put it. Like you have to have talent to do it. Like Penn isn't going to run Golden State's offense, and the Ivy League is still the Ivy League, and whatever. There's some. I shouldn't shit on the Ivy League. There's some good players down there. I liked Yale this year. They're fun, but it's still like you'd see that slow plodding basketball where that's interesting though. The part where it goes so far one way that mid-range jumpers are available. Because as a defense, you're inviting them. Like that's the lowest EV shot to take. Like I'm going to invite you to take that, and then teams are just going to start taking it.
That I would argue almost that that same evolution happened in the NBA also. If you look across the teams that I would qualify as realistic contenders this year, there are at least 5 different, like true different styles of play. And I think general managers maybe or coaches have gotten better at like understanding their own talent, strengths and weaknesses and shaping their style to suit that. And, I mean, it makes for a very entertaining product, honestly. Like, you would have thought, well, if everybody is kind of going the same direction, maybe if we try something different, we'll find an edge. I do think that's happening broadly across the NBA right now. It's interesting that it's happening in college basketball too, I guess.
There's money in winning. Everyone's trying to win.
Yeah.
Speaking of more teams, but you're right about the NBA. It's not just like homogenized. We shoot 63s a night. Like smart coaches play to strengths.
Everybody's trying to do it a little differently, and you can group certain styles of play and find a lottery team as well as a contender. depending on just their ultimate talent and experience.
Would you say recently it's been more kind of geared toward optimizing for personnel and less for team in a way than it has in the past? Because that's sort of my impression.
Without a question.
That was like our Lamar Jackson thing. Like we kept saying that. I can't remember how many teams. How many teams would have just ruined his career? Like just not built an offense around him, like a coaching staff or management or whoever was making the decisions there. The Ravens sucked last year with the injuries, but the kid got an MVP and probably would have been maybe not even starting on a lot of teams who would have just not.
Oh my God, we haven't developed the passer enough. So
yes, there are so many management and coaching staffs that try to force these square pegs into round holes because that's the way they want to do things, rather than what's my best path to victory with the pieces I've been given here and making that happen. That's the smart team. That's analytics. Like analytics is not just picking the numbers apart and deciding what the best plays are. Like absolutely taking your pieces and making the best path to victory.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But speaking of winning and money, we are on the eve of the Sweet 16. Sweet 16 is pretty entertaining. A lot of teams that I know you have interest in, particularly through the Bet Process Calcutta. Anything that you look across the board right now and you think is especially mispriced, or any action you have in play that you're fired up about for Thursday and Friday's action?
Well, I mean, I think the nice part about the Calcuttas is that I have a rooting interest in just the team winning. And I don't always have to, I don't have to have an edge on the number just to have a stake in it.
So you almost exclusively play sides and totals. You're not into money lines at all.
I mean, I could be, to be honest, but I don't really price them up. And I probably should. I'm live hearing the leaks in my game.
We're sitting here ruining his psyche, Drew.
No. It's so I guess in general, your sides and totals pregame, second half.
Yeah, betting sides and totals second half too.
Okay.
I thought stuff was pretty tight for the Sweet 16. Numbers are pretty good. I think Purdue's a little low. I bet Purdue.
Oh no!
I know.
No respect for the St. Peter's Peacocks. What is going on here? You are a proud peacock in the Calcutta, and you're going against your boys.
What is it? 12.5 now?
Yeah, I think I got mostly 12.
12.5 is light, huh?
Really? They won a couple games, Drew.
Very light. It's a little light. There's not a lot of big edges out there. Yeah, I mean, it just, I don't know. They're a very, very good defense, like a power 6 level talented defense, but they're a horrific offense who's played really good for 2 games. And they're eventually going to have a game like they probably had all year where they, high 50s, low 60s, and are just struggling to get shots to go down.
Okay. So now the kind of team level makeup of Purdue is awfully similar to Kentucky. Like same sort of strengths and weaknesses, same sort of, if things are going wrong, they struggle to create turnover. In fact, Purdue might be like one of the worst teams in the entire 68 in terms of defensive turnover percentage.
No turnovers, horrible ball screen defense.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that. I just am looking at their T-bomb page. But that seemed to be kind of a key to St. Peter's keeping their nose ahead of Kentucky in that matchup. That's interesting that you're seeing value on Purdue.
Throw out overtime, like St. Peter's getting to 70 points in regulation 2 games in a row is just something. Like if you go,
they were saving it.
Yeah, they were just saving it all year. I think the God, I think the MAC final. MAC. I say MAC. I mean it with 2 A's, but I'm not making that cheap sound that I do. Like MAC.
Okay. Yeah.
The Metro Atlanta, like even the final, I think they scored like 60 points. I'm pretty sure they blew someone out early. I was scared to bet them to win it. I looked at them, I'm like, fuck, this team's a pain in the ass for everyone to play, but they're just gonna go out there and score like 52 points against somebody. And like Iona probably, and then Iona just out early, never happened. And here
Defense wins championship,
fun,
guys.
It's a fun team.
No, I'm still holding out hope, although you've thrown a little bit of cold water. The Peacocks are going to get there. I think there's their stinker is coming against North Carolina probably, unless you think North Carolina doesn't get there. Is North Carolina going to get by UCLA?
I think so. I think Hawkeyes is going to play. I was trying to find.
Latest I ever heard is he is going.
But yeah, I just imagine he'll figure out a way to play. UCLA is a super weird team. We kind of talked about the way basketball's changing, and they take a ton of mid-range jump shots and a ton of weird shot selection, but they're good at it. And they are a very good defense without like a mega shot blocker, which is sometimes a little weird. In college, they're just very positionally sound. I loved North Carolina at the beginning of the year. I thought they'd be a lot better. I lost money expressing that opinion. They certainly have they've got a lot of talent, and they've got like a kind of a variety of pieces. But I think the numbers are pretty good there, and it should just be a good game.
Oh, okay.
I have it 3.5. I think he's right on the UCLA. Like UCLA should be able to defend outside well enough but again, with some player uncertainty here, there's no fun betting that one.
No,
I don't have anything to bet the next 2 days. I just looked at it right now. Everything's like super close unless you think. I mean, there's probably a wide distribution on that Purdue game where there's a bunch of games where Purdue wins by like 25 points.
Okay, well, if it's Purdue UCLA, I have no skin in that, so I don't really care about that region. How about Gonzaga? Anything about their performances giving you pause that they're going to ultimately get out of the West, or do the Razorbacks have the makeup to truly challenge them?
It's kind of a shame because my like 3 of my biggest kind of longs versus the market were Memphis, Arkansas, and Gonzaga, and they were all right there.
Oh,
but I mean, I think that like the basic perception of Memphis, like I think everyone knew they were underrated. I don't know if people knew how underrated they were. All of their kind of bad this season was in a stretch where none of their good players were playing. A couple of their NBA guys were out. Like when they're healthy, they're incredibly good. I had them pretty underrated, and it's just tough that they ran into Gonzaga. Gonzaga is really good. I don't have a lot to say about Gonzaga that probably hasn't been said over the last couple of years. They're really good. Timmy's amazing. I was watching that Memphis game, and he kind of brought them back by himself, which was pretty entertaining. And Arkansas, Arkansas's gotten a lot better too. And they're kind of an interesting one totals wise, because I have that number pretty fair, but I think there's a lot of ways I could be wrong there, because they've won some games in some very different styles where they've played some pretty up-tempo offense, but they've gotten a lot better as they've clamped down defensively late in the year. And that's what's caused them to they probably jumped like 30 spots nationally between the 2 weeks or 3 weeks into the end of the year and now, just because their defense has gotten really good. So,
and that's
I like to hear that.
Signal, not noise. Okay.
Yeah, I said that this morning.
Yeah,
I said
very good.
I'd bet that under.
Okay,
I have that one pretty close too. But like the Memphis thing did fucking suck. Like even if you didn't have a money rooting interest with financials on Memphis, like that team beats every other team in the tournament with the effort they put out that day. Like you don't beat that team without like a second half Timmy. Like what he did was just stupid. And I mean, Gonzaga, it sucks to be up against a team like that who can just pull something out like that. He was nuts. And I don't even fully understand if he's like, next level good.
Yeah. Well, the big thing with him is that he has struggled on defense for a couple of years. He's gotten better, but I mean, Baylor exposed him last year in that title game as, when he gets switched on to guards, that's just not his skill set. But what helps them this year, I mean, is that Holmgren's just an eraser at the rim. So they've kind of turned in some good defensive efforts in halves to win games as well.
Imagine if he hit the weight room.
Let's assume Gonzaga. Let's assume the number is fair. Gonzaga wins, and moves on. What is let's flip a coin and give it to Texas Tech. What kind of number are you going to see in the West Regional Final? Under 10?
On the spot here, let me give me
10.
30. It'll definitely be under 10.
Okay.
I can actually go
4.5.
What?
Nah, it'll be a little higher. I think it's.
I just like Tech too much.
Oh, okay. He's like 6. Okay. All right.
I know. So they played already this year, and I think.
Oh, that's right. They did.
Yeah.
Tech played everybody early in the season somehow.
Yeah, they dominated.
They played
game.
Duke too. They played both of these teams that we would potentially face.
Yeah. I think that number's that'll be interesting schematically. Not that I'm like a huge X's and O's knowledge guy, but Texas Tech plays this like weird defense that nobody can solve, where they basically don't allow you to get the ball into the middle to get shots at the rim or kick out to shooters or anything. And you kind of have to, they basically make you beat them by like throwing skip passes and leaving guys one pass away, like way more open than teams normally do. So it's kind of a defense that in theory should do really well against Gonzaga's offense, which is all about either getting it to Timmy in the kind of high post or running some pick and roll where Nembhard kind of probes in and finds open shooters. So
cool.
Kind of an interesting matchup there.
That'll be, yeah. Like I do hope those teams advance, mostly because I won't bet either of those games. And I just want to see that matchup because like that'll be a really weird one stylistically with that defense. I'm still mad at Rutgers from last year. That was a nice future price, I thought. Sit there and watch them win every game all year, and then I don't know. I think in my heart I knew they'd be gassed for that game, and I didn't buy out of it anyway. And then I just watch them get bodied by Baylor. And yeah, like I'm having PTSD with you bringing up Timmy getting exposed. I forgot how bad that was for like the entirety of the game.
Yeah,
that Baylor team was good.
Yeah, it'd sure be a shame if
Pretty
that happened
incredible.
against another Big 12 team this year. As you look at the Zona regional, and that specifically that Zona Houston game, it feels like
that's the fun one.
That's the fun one, and it feels like that's your de facto winner is going to the Final Four. Maybe I'm crazy, but don't love Michigan or Villanova ultimately getting past either of these two teams. And as I look at kind of the statistical profile for these two, one thing pretty clearly stands out, and that is that Houston sends a lot of men to the free throw line. And is this game come down to something as stupid as it depends how it's called? If they let them play, Houston's got them. If they call it tight, Arizona's going to be able to get it done at the charity stripe.
I mean, I'm sure it definitely, it should be a close game. It has an effect. It's kind of, Houston has the other in a purely betting markets focused kind of way. Houston is like the darling of the analytical community. And even as betting markets kind of follow a lot of those projections, I still think it's, they're still leaning a little bit away from how much some of those sites love Houston. And I would kind of agree with them. Not enough of an edge to bet.
Yeah, I think
sort of lean toward
do the
Arizona.
sites love Houston because they're including data when they had a fully healthy squad?
They haven't been that much worse without.
Yeah, the team is what they did to Memphis in the final there in the conference tournament with the squad that they're putting out there right now. It's not like. I think people were more scared of them taking a step back and downgrading them. And I'm not sure if we're just talking, I feel like we're talking about Torvik because he has them a lot higher than a lot of places. Like, I don't think he gave them much of a downgrade, but I'm not sure if he's making that, especially in like the Barthag thing he's using. I'm not sure he's downgrading a team until they actually perform badly.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it also is that they have these like outlandish offensive rebounding numbers that potentially shouldn't be repeatable, but keep being repeatable. And I think there's this narrative of like, well, they can keep being repeatable when you play teams that are not quite as good. Their schedule is kind of weak this year. I don't really subscribe to that because they've done it for like 3 years. But they have not played a super great schedule, and they did lose twice to Memphis, who is a team that could actually rebound with them. Arizona can obviously do that. They're huge, and Koloko is really, really good. But that seems to be the thing there. If Houston offensive rebounds, they are going to have an upper hand in Arizona sometimes. They definitely didn't rebound well against TCU because they're always trying to get up the floor so fast, get in transition, push the ball.
Funny, you brought up the refereeing or whatnot, how many times somebody's getting into the charity stripe. And it's funny, a lot of times, like during the Brown Bag Bets, Drew, people pull up KenPom, talk teams with me, and someone brought up my favorite column if you just look at a team's KenPom is free throw percentage defense.
Yep.
Like the free throw, because they made the joke, like this team for the year, the opponents were making like 65% of their free throws. And he said, well, don't forget their amazing free throw defense. And I sat and thought about that all day. And I'm like, God, would a team play a little differently on defense if they were if their entire conference outside of maybe they shoot okay, but if a big chunk of the conference shot poorly from the free throw line consistently, like would they play defense completely differently? And then that could be like a problem once they get out of conference play if they did move on to, any of these shit tournaments, even not the big tournament. So we joked about free throw defense, but it kind of had my brain in the pretzel for a day. And it's one of those things too, where I don't think I actually went and learned anything, but it just bothered me for a long time when you start talking about shit like that. And I think there's so much variability in free throw stuff that I haven't fully gotten to the bottom of any of that. That wasn't even a question. That was just me explaining something that hurt my head yesterday.
Free throw defense does not seem forward predictive, if that's what you're asking.
No.
I
will sit
significantly divorced from forward projection purposes. Okay, so I guess tough to call who comes out of that conference. You don't have any skin in the game in the Calcutta there, right?
No, but I think I do like 3 or 4 of these every March, so I kind of have skin everywhere.
Okay, the main question then, the Midwest. You're a Chicago guy. You going to watch your Jayhawks?
I will be in the building.
All right, excellent, very cool. Have you been to these before?
Not this late in the tournament. I've been to, I think, an opening round once.
Opening round, okay, but not Sweet 16. You gonna go to the Elite Eight as well?
I don't know. I don't think I have plans to, but we'll see.
Okay.
Depends on how our Jayhawks would have to win. But
yeah, you're gonna follow the Jayhawks to New Orleans. So watch them cut down the nets.
Follow the river.
Probably not. That would be fun.
I bet you it would
Sounds
be.
like trouble.
I bet you would be. You're gonna be too busy at Bet Bash, I guess.
I will not be at Bet Bash.
You didn't do one of those commercials? I did find out, Drew, the women's Final Four is in Minneapolis.
Ooh.
I think I could have tickets pretty cheap for something like that.
We'll have some skin in the game there, man.
Especially if it's the second day. Like you always hear about people doing like Final Four. You go buy tickets off the people who are fans of the team that lost in the semifinals.
Yeah.
You can get some decent deals, but I think I could just buy the whole strip for the women's Final Four.
Yeah. Do you
go sit courtside? It'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, Andrew, it may be competitive for maybe
it'll be good basketball. It's so top heavy in women's
basketball, but maybe
once you get to the finals,
tickets.
it's usually a pretty good game.
Yeah.
But man, some of these early round games for the women's stuff it's pretty rough watching some of those teams get beat like by 100.
Yeah, Howard scored 4 points in the first half. Yeah, that was tough. You originate any women's CBB, Andrew?
I do not. I don't think
How about
there's a.
WNBA?
I do the WNBA, yeah.
But not women's CBB, huh?
There's
Somebody out
a
there.
there's a decent liquidity gap there.
Yeah.
On what?
I mean, the WNBA is liquid enough that you can bet. Women's college is probably it's the one time I looked pretty hard to get down on.
I think most paperhead limits for women's CBB for the tournament at least are 250, 500. I've seen some multiple thousands. And somebody out there is absolutely originating the shit out of that.
Yeah, I just think like during the regular season though, like it's just it's just not even listed outside of some games. Like it's not like the men's where they're going to list every fucking last game all the way down to the extras. The women's it's just super hard to find outside of the regular season because we know some people who bet it, but they're much more active this time of year when a bunch of places start opening up tournament prices.
Yeah, I didn't see any lines for the women's NIT, which was unfortunate. No, I think no, there's a market there at least for the tournament time. Not don't go blow it up or anything, but it's out there. And there's liquidity. Okay, interesting. You gonna bet any NBA regular season playoffs?
I mean, I bet the stuff that I would not call originator, but like some advantage player kind of stuff. Like if you can beat the market to some player news or, stuff like that. Nothing too complex.
Cool. Do you catch?
So you're safe. You can keep printing money over there betting the NBA.
Do you catch any just like good advantage stuff in other small markets beyond what you originate? Do you like with betting partnerships and stuff?
I mean, stuff here and there. I mean, I assume most it's not a large community of people who do this, so you end up kind of knowing people.
Did you see any good any hot stuff in the Oscars? Or,
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I got
Andy, you see any hot Oscar stuff come through?
We should talk to some people. I'm sure there's some people out there that are all of a sudden accounts they're using are starting to find Oscar props in them from other people, and that's it's such a I don't know. We're years past Yorgos, but that's such a dumb market to begin with. The fact that there is a bunch of liquidity the week of,
I know it's
at
crazy.
a lot of places
it's
kind of dumb, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, who would have believed there would be as much liquidity as there was for the Olympics in judo and absolute random shit. So it is it's weird, it's wild, and it seems like it's growing. I guess. Do you get the sense that overall the space is improving for someone in your position?
Yeah, I think so. To be honest, I would love it if I didn't have to deal with paperhead stuff ever again.
Oh, sure.
And I think we're still a ways away from that.
Yeah.
But I do. I mean, I think some people, obviously, their whole business is kind of doing it like that. But I would love it if. Yeah, I would love it if I just didn't have to deal with kind of the annoyance that all of that brings, and I could, kind of just bet what I wanted to and know what the limits are going to be at places. But I get why that's an unreasonable ask a little bit.
If they had a Chicago mercantile betting exchange and asked you to be the market maker for CBB, are you turning them down?
I mean, I'd love to. I'd probably get picked off and lose some money, but I think I'd figure it out eventually.
I love it, man. Do you think that in general it would have to be, if that were a real thing, it would have to be siloed to where you were just the Big Ten guy and they had somebody else doing the ACC and somebody else doing the Big East? Or
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
You should ask, your player prop thing, Drew. Hire a sharp guy to do player props, and then Spanky kind of shot that down hard, which
you did not agree with that.
Yeah, I think we were kind of there, but we just said maybe. I think we're more hopeful, but yeah, I think I think that's why that stuff just always can be lower limits, because it doesn't matter if you hired the best person in the world. If you raised limits on player prop stuff, the speed at which people would pass that person would accelerate. Like the liquidity increasing in a market with high variance like that, all of a sudden would just draw sharks to the water, and they would get smarter really fast. So I think that's like the whole. Drew had a thing on a couple podcasts ago about hiring the best player prop bettors in the world and having them, run the other side of it. Hey, you get plus 110 now, and I think we kind of ended up on that where those people still would probably get the shit beat out of them by the market.
Yeah, I do think, though, I mean, if you look at financial markets, which sports betting is in some form, the amount of like surface fee and the amount of products and the amount of niche stuff that gets covered for huge liquidity, I mean, it exists, and someone is signing up and making hand over fist as a market maker. So it might take a while, but like that eventually, I think, has to exist. There's too much money in being good at market making and letting people bet and making markets that I think it eventually has to happen.
Right. I could not agree with that more personally, but it may be 20 years away. Who the hell knows?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, is that the one thing you would change if you could change anything about the current space? Get you a betting exchange and a chair at the table?
I mean, I don't know if I have like a one thing, but an exchange would be great. Like an open flow of betting like that would be nice.
Right on. Do you
that
still
seems
originate
like the 20-year thing, Drew? Like the Wire Act and the fact that there's like 25 states that aren't legal yet. Like there's so many barriers to that. But one day there'll be a 49 state, exchange.
And Utah you'll have to leave Utah if you want.
Utah will just be still doing it. Yeah, they'll still be doing their own thing.
Okay, real quick about the Calcutta. When you set it up, when you went in to participate this year, did you have a strategy about sort of how you were going to approach team acquisition or play the other players? And which is more important?
I mean, I don't want the answers to be so boring sometimes, but it's pretty much you do your best to come up with what percent of the pot every team's going to go for, and you kind of bid up till there. I had an idea of which teams I was probably higher on than the other participants, just because I think everyone's pulling from the same public data sources there to come up with what the fair price should be, and in betting, kind of against those public sources or in line with them all year. I kind of knew where I might have some edge and might have some teams that I could buy, and have so far, run pretty good on those teams where I had a little higher than Ken Palmer, Bart Torvik, or any of those.
Yeah, you kind of just have to flow with it because you don't know what the other. There's a bunch of blank bingo cards that everyone else is looking at, and they could be, having the same opinion about a team as you. But once you set your number, and everybody does things differently. Once you set your price and say, like, I might be higher than everyone else using the public facing shit, but if somebody else in the bidding is too, then say la vie, they might just get it because there's a price that it's worth, there's a price that it's worth letting it go at.
We learned one time that somebody was in there with no numbers.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of in favor of, while that Calcutta is fun, I'm kind of in favor of the ones where some of the rewards are like weird stuff or stuff that you can't just go say, like, Gonzaga's got a 50% chance to make the Elite Eight. Like this number, it could be 48 and it could be 52, but like this number is pretty set in stone. Because I think that causes, like, on that stream, I think we said the implied pot stayed pretty steady the whole time and nobody really had it moving much. But if you have something weird in there and somebody overbids for that, then it changes everyone else's projection of what the pot's going to be, and it kind of gets some weirdness and some room to operate instead of somebody has the 72 and somebody has it 76 and it goes for 75 for some mistake.
Yeah. And that's what you have to make the weird stuff. You almost have to overpay on the back end. Like it has to be a bigger prize than it should be. Otherwise, if it's just like, hey, we're going to give away 0.25% of the Calcutta for the team that shoots the most free throws, there's not going to be a big change in how teams are valued in everyone's numbers. But if that you make that you make that 5% of the pot for the team to make the most free throws, all of a sudden some teams are going to get weird. Like there is a decent chance that you might make some big adjustments on a team. You have to value a team, how late they can go and how often they're going to get to the line, and that's where it could be fun. And same thing with golf, like something just completely maybe unmodelable, like longest hole out. Like if somebody chips in from the fairway, it could be God knows who just getting lucky. Like that's not, you could put some numbers to it, but it's not very easy to predict something like that. And if you gave out some high prices for something like that, shit could get weird. I don't know. Those are fun. Things like that make it more fun.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I don't have the answers, but you're dead on. There's got to be some fun thing like, a side pot for
5% for most free throws is stupid.
That's
lunacy.
Yeah,
People
no, it's got to be
that.
like largest margin of victory times most missed 3-pointers, right? Like something like kind of random like that. That
I don't think you have to go that far.
Because the team's got to win, but they
divided by the sum of their jersey numbers on the floor when the game is ending.
So I did one where, so first of all, 20% of the pot goes to the worst 4 teams to make it through the first weekend. So like it's interesting because you get a bad team through, and now it's 5% each, but like now you're rooting against the other teams to lose, and it's kind of interesting. And there's some variance around like if this team wins, what are the chances that they are one of the 4 worst teams? And you can always throw in some like against the spread stuff, like some percent of the pot goes to whatever team does the best against the spread the whole tournament or something like that.
So I didn't watch the recap in close detail. Did you end up with all 16 bottom seeds because you went in with that, like you had that plan when you went into it, or nobody else had a real appetite for those, or you got to the point where you're like, well, I can't risk losing a portion of that pot, like because there was only going to be one pot awarded to largest margin of victory, right? And so they're all kind of competing against each other if you have all of them, but at the same time, if you have all of them, you're a lot less likely to lose that pot, right?
Yeah. So we talked about it in the after. Is that I just had hang on, my headphones are going out here.
Oh, sorry.
We're good. So I just had the chance that one of those teams was a victim of the largest blowout a little higher than a couple of the other guys. And I also had the chance that one of those 16 bottom teams won a little higher. Like I only thought there was I think it was like a 7% chance that the biggest upset didn't come from a 13 or 6 through 16.
That sounds bad.
And I think some like Matt Davidow had said he had it at like 12 or 13, which that causes the difference. Although the funny thing is, the one team that actually paid any money out was St. Peter's, and that was the one team that I bought for basically fair that I didn't really think I had an edge to. And the only reason I got bid up there was because I think Rufus was trying to buy them because Yale was in that group. And I basically was like, well, I should own all of them, so I'll bid exactly fair on this, not have any edge. And sometimes you just get lucky, which is frequently the case.
Because is the biggest blowouts in there too, right? Currently? That's the same group.
It was, yeah, actually. It was.
That might end up being the triple scooper. The only upset and the biggest, and they ended up making it to the Sweet 16. So
and I'd like to say pure unadulterated luck.
We talked about that after the NFL one was over. Like the idea that anyone had any meaningful EV on the actual price was pretty small. It's like,
the NFL ones, everybody's sitting there with the same numbers. For sure.
You're basically like, hey, let's grab a couple teams and cross our fingers.
Yeah, that's basically like, how much do you want to spend? Like
Yeah.
if you know the pot, like how much do you want to spend? Here's which teams fit in that range, and if maybe you can get this one and then add that one at a certain point too. I like that. I do like that though. What Andrew talked about with the worst 4 teams to make it through the first weekend.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Because then if you had a couple, and then you have to start just cheering again. You have to start cheering for all the blue bloods. Like no more upsets. I want to keep these in that. It's like Pizzola with every time a team started getting up by like 2 or 3 touchdowns, he would just start sweating because he had that. I think he had biggest loss and right off the bat in the NFL playoffs. So he was just cheering for close games for basically the entire NFL playoffs.
Yeah, that makes the whole middle class more desirable too, which helps flatten things out a lot, which is nice. Because you're basically like, there's not a ton of incentive to. I always thought like I rarely would end up with an 8 or a 9 seed, even a 7-10 in those, because like the utility on that second win is pretty fragile. And,
right.
And if there's an added spice of, oh well, this if that happens, and then you also get the kicker of being the lowest 4, that's nice. Makes it a lot more.
Should put something together before the season starts, like a full. And I'm going to say 358 because I haven't really checked who's moving up or down. I know there's a couple teams coming up, but a full 358 team Calcutta preseason
before the season starts.
Take a whole day off. Like, you
have
to like skip work that day. You know when you would do it? You'd have to do it during the baseball all-star break, when there's like that day where there's literally no sports to bet on that day. Well, and everybody shows up at like 7 in the morning.
You know how bad I would love to do, like, not even one for the whole 350 teams or whatever, but just like a 128 player like tennis slam would be fun as shit. But that's that's
the time
tough.
between the draw.
And nobody else cares enough to do.
I would be in for every FBS college football team, because there's like 120. And it's a more reasonable number, and there's a lot of really good season-long rewards there that you could do.
Great call.
Oh yeah, you could have fun with that. Just like
win your conference,
most touchdowns,
win your conference, win your bowl. Yeah.
I mean, those you don't even have to do weird ones, because before the season it's so hard to figure out all of the, but winning a conference, having the Heisman winner, like all the stuff that you could kind of have a stake in. Cool. I think it'd be really fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, whatever.
Good idea.
FCS. You guys have a lot of friends in high places. Put it together.
I'll twist some. I'll try to twist some arms on that. That'll be fun as hell. That'd be cool. All right, man.
Solves problems for the Jersey bettors who can't bet on Monmouth.
Yeah. Do you still bet baseball, or you bag it?
I mean, I do, but I don't want to. I don't want to come off like I'm a big, originator, have really good numbers for everything. It's a lot of AP kind of stuff. And, the props are relatively liquid. You can bet those. So
cool. Anything especially interesting about this season coming up that we should let people know about? Ball's going to be juiced or not juiced, or a total grab bag, or what?
I don't even know what players have signed with which teams. I'd probably have to go figure that out.
Oh, we got Correa. Do you have a rooting interest? Like, do you have a Chicago team you like, or you just say the hell with?
I'm a Cleveland Guardians fan. Oof. So yeah, they have been good and refuse to spend money for like 10 years.
Yeah, you say you're behind. It was like what Jason had tweeted, that he bet the Guardians plus 10.5 and plus 14.5 in that preseason game. They were getting blown out, and it just didn't click with me, the name change, because we haven't talked about it in like 6 months, and I was super sure for like 10 seconds that USFL had started. I'm like, shit, is he betting like some other football league? What the fuck is this? And it was like, oh no, the Guardians, like, they're just getting the shit stomped out of them in a preseason game. But yeah, baseball, that's a bad name. It's not a bad name. I take it back. It's a good enough name. It's a bad logo. The G around the baseball is rough. They need to rework that.
New names are tough. I feel like everyone hates them. What are you going to do?
The best tweet in the world about the whole thing that came out. It's like, what if somebody had a football team in 2021 or whatever, and they had to change the name and they said, hey, we're going to name it the Packers. Like, people People would lose their minds. Like, what are you even thinking here? It's just, new names are tough.
I just can't imagine. It seems insane to care about the nickname of the sporting team that much. I just could never get to caring that much. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't cheer for Laundry anymore these days.
I'm gonna go to some Twins games out of the fact that
oh yeah,
Correa should be fun and our pitching will be horrible. So I'll just go there, bet the over, have some peanuts.
Are they doing the DH in the NL this year or is it next year?
Yeah, it's
this
DH.
Year. This year?
They're doing that.
Oh.
I think runner on second is back again in extras.
Yes.
Which people are pissed about, but whatever.
Okay. Interesting. Good deal. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. This was fantastic.
This was
Andrew, of course, you can check him out at Time and C on Twitter. I wish you nothing but the best of luck in the Calcutta. Godspeed to Kansas and the Jayhawks. Hopefully, you being there in the arena isn't going to jinx them. Not that that happens, but knocking on wood here for you. The rest of the tournament is going to be fun to watch it play out, surely. If you have any thoughts or questions or want to reach out to Andrew, give him some accounts to provide some liquidity to his college basketball. I'm sure you'd appreciate that, especially since you're going to miss out on all the good ones at Bet Bash.
Oh, God.
All right, guys. Hey, best of luck. Enjoy the rest of the tournament. And thanks again for all your time.
And music. End credits. Hopefully I have better luck during the end credits than I do during the opening credits. The timing on that was so fucking wild. Like the credits go on.
Oh, I know.